I never thought a cup of coffee could change my life. But that's exactly what happened on that chilly October morning. The line at Joe's coffee shop stretched to the door. I tapped my foot impatiently, checking my watch every few seconds. Another day, another deadline. The aroma of freshly ground beans filled the air, a stark contrast to the stale smell of desperation that seemed to cling to the man hunched in the corner. He caught my eye as I approached the counter. A veteran, judging by his worn camouflage jacket. His withered face told a story of battles fought both abroad and at home. I quickly looked away, uncomfortable with the raw pain in his gaze. The usual, Mr. Parker? Sarah, the barista, greeted me with a smile. Yeah, thanks. And? I hesitated, glancing back at the veteran. Make it two. Sarah raised an eyebrow but said nothing as she rang up the order. I grabbed both cups and, before I could talk myself out of it, walked over to the veteran's table. Mind if I join you? I asked, setting one of the coffees in front of him. He looked up, surprise flickering across his face. Suit yourself, he mumbled, wrapping his calloused hands around the warm cup. I sat down, suddenly unsure of what to say. The veteran took a sip, closing his eyes as if savoring a long-lost luxury. Thanks, he said softly. Name's John. Tom, I replied, extending my hand. He shook it firmly, his grip telling of a strength that went beyond the physical. We sat in silence for a moment, the bustle of the coffee shop fading into the background. I checked my watch again, anxiety creeping in as I thought about the mountain of work waiting for me. John must have noticed. Don't let me keep you, he said, a hint of resignation in his voice. I felt a pang of guilt. No, it's fine. I've got a few minutes. I leaned back, forcing myself to relax. You from around here? John shook his head. Just passing through. Been moving around a lot since I got back. The weight of unspoken words hung between us. I wanted to ask more, but something held me back. Instead, I found myself talking about my own life, my job at the advertising firm, my wife Lisa, our 5-year-old daughter Emily. As I spoke, I noticed a change in John's demeanor. The tension in his shoulders eased slightly, and a ghost of a smile played on his lips when I mentioned Emily's latest antics. Kids, he said, shaking his head. They've got a way of putting things in perspective, don't they? I nodded, thinking of Emily's laughter, her tiny hand in mine. They sure do. My phone buzzed, shattering the moment. I glanced at the screen and sighed. I've got to run. It was nice meeting you, John. He nodded, that haunted look creeping back into his eyes. Thanks for the coffee, Tom. And for sitting with me. As I hurried out of the shop, I couldn't shake the feeling that I should have done more. But life was calling, and I had no idea that in less than 24 hours, our paths would cross again in the most unexpected and terrifying way. The next day started like any other. I kissed Emily goodbye, her blonde curls bouncing as she ran to the school bus. Little did I know, it would be the last normal moment of my life. I was knee-deep in a pitch meeting when my phone buzzed. Lisa's name flashed on the screen. Strange. She never called during work hours. Excuse me, I muttered, stepping out of the conference room. Lisa? What's wrong? Her voice came through in broken sobs. Tom, it's Emily. There's been an accident. The world tilted on its axis. I gripped the wall for support, my knees threatening to give way. What happened? Where is she? At Memorial Hospital. Tom, they said she was hit by a car. I don't remember leaving the office or the drive to the hospital. Everything was a blur until I burst through the emergency room doors, wild-eyed and panting. My daughter, I gasped at the receptionist. Emily Parker. Where is she? A nurse appeared, her face a mask of professional calm. Mr. Parker? Please, come with me. She led me down a sterile hallway, the smell of antiseptic burning my nostrils. My heart pounded in my ears, drowning out the nurse's words. All I could focus on was the sight of Lisa, huddled in a plastic chair outside a treatment room. Tom. She flew into my arms, her body shaking with sobs. What happened? I asked, holding her tight. Lisa pulled back, wiping her eyes. She was at the park with her class. A car, it came out of nowhere. But there was a man, Tom. He pushed her out of the way. Is she okay? Before Lisa could answer, a doctor emerged from the treatment room. Mr. and Mrs. Parker? We nodded, clinging to each other. Your daughter is stable, he said, and I felt the vice around my chest loosen slightly. She has a concussion and a broken arm, but it could have been much worse. The man who saved her took the brunt of the impact. Who was he? I asked. The doctor shook his head. We don't know. He refused treatment and left before the ambulance arrived. A commotion at the end of the hallway drew our attention. A man in a tattered camouflage jacket was arguing with a security guard. Sir, you can't go back there, the guard insisted. I just need to know if she's okay, the man pleaded. I squinted, recognition dawning. John? He turned, his eyes meeting mine. The same haunted eyes I'd seen over coffee just yesterday. But now they were filled with a desperate concern. Tom? John's voice was rough with emotion. The little girl, is she your daughter? I nodded, unable to speak. John's shoulders sagged with relief. Thank God. I couldn't just stand there. I had to do something. The realization hit me like a freight train. This man, this stranger I'd bought coffee for on a whim, had saved my daughter's life. You. I choked out. You're the one who pushed her out of the way? John nodded, looking suddenly uncomfortable. I should go. I'm glad she's okay. He turned to leave, but I caught his arm. Wait, I said, my voice thick with emotion. Please, stay. John hesitated, his eyes darting between me and the exit. I could see the battle raging within him, the desire to flee warring with something else. Something that looked a lot like hope. Please, I repeated, my voice barely above a whisper. You saved my daughter's life. At least let me thank you properly. He nodded slowly, his shoulders slumping as if in defeat. Or maybe it was relief. I couldn't tell. Lisa approached us, her eyes red-rimmed but curious. Tom? Who's this? I opened my mouth to explain, but John beat me to it. Ma'am, I'm John. I was there when your daughter was almost hit. His voice was gruff, laced with an emotion I couldn't quite place. Lisa's eyes widened. In a heartbeat, she had her arms around John, sobbing into his worn jacket. Thank you, she choked out. Thank you for saving our Emily. John stood rigid, clearly uncomfortable with the display of emotion. But after a moment, he awkwardly patted Lisa's back. A nurse appeared in the hallway. Mr. and Mrs. Parker? Emily's awake. You can see her now. Lisa pulled away from John, wiping her eyes. She looked at me, then back at John. You should come too, she said. I'm sure Emily would like to meet her hero. John shook his head. I don't think that's a good idea. I'm not good with kids. Nonsense, I said, surprising myself with the firmness in my voice. You're coming with us. We entered Emily's room, my heart clenching at the sight of my little girl in the hospital bed. Her arm was in a cast, and a bandage covered a cut on her forehead. But her eyes lit up when she saw us. Daddy. Mommy, she cried. We rushed to her bedside, peppering her with gentle hugs and kisses. John hung back, a shadow in the doorway. Emily, sweetie, I said, there's someone I'd like you to meet. I beckoned John forward. This is John. He's the one who saved you from the car. Emily's eyes widened. Are you a superhero? She asked, her voice filled with awe. John's face flushed. No, kid. I'm just a guy who was in the right place at the right time. But you saved me, Emily insisted. That makes you a hero. Something in John's expression cracked. For a moment, I saw past the gruff exterior to the pain underneath. The weight of whatever he'd been carrying seemed to lift, just a little. I guess maybe it does, he said softly. As I watched John interact with Emily, a realization hit me. This man, who I dismissed as just another struggling veteran yesterday, had become the most important person in our lives overnight. And yet, I knew nothing about him. John, I said, when Emily's released, we'd like you to come stay with us for a while. He looked at me, startled. I couldn't impose. You're not imposing, Lisa cut in. We insist. John hesitated, then nodded. All right, he said. All right. As we left the hospital that night, John walking beside us, I couldn't shake the feeling that our lives had become inexorably intertwined. For better or worse, John was now a part of our family story. And I had no idea how much that would change everything. The days following Emily's accident blurred together in a haze of hospital visits and sleepless nights. John, true to his word, stayed with us. He slept on our couch, a silent sentinel in our living room. One night, unable to sleep, I wandered downstairs for a glass of water. I found John sitting in the dark, staring out the window. Can't sleep? I asked, flicking on a lamp. He flinched at the sudden light. Not used to soft beds and quiet nights, he muttered. I sat across from him, studying his face in the dim light. The haunted look I'd first noticed in the coffee shop seemed more pronounced now. Want to talk about it? I offered. John's laugh was hollow. Trust me, you don't want to hear it. Try me. He was quiet for a long moment. Then, I was over there for 3 tours. Saw things, did things. He trailed off, his eyes distant. Coming back, it's like I don't fit anymore. Like I'm a puzzle piece from the wrong box. I nodded, not fully understanding but wanting to. Is that why you were at the park that day? John's eyes snapped to mine, sharp and alert. What do you mean? I mean, why were you there at that exact moment? He looked away, his jaw clenching. I was saying goodbye. The weight of his words hit me like a punch to the gut. John, were you going to end it? He finished for me. Yeah. I was. My mind raced back to that morning in the coffee shop. If I hadn't bought him that coffee, if we hadn't talked. What changed? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. John's eyes met mine, and I saw a glimmer of something I hadn't seen before. Hope. You did, he said simply. That coffee, that conversation, it wasn't much, but it was enough to make me hesitate. And then I saw Emily in danger, and I just reacted. I felt a lump form in my throat. John, I had no idea. He shrugged. How could you? We were strangers. We're not strangers now, I said firmly. John nodded, a ghost of a smile on his lips. No, I guess we're not. We sat in companionable silence for a while, the weight of John's confession hanging between us. Finally, I spoke. You know, I've been thinking. I have a friend who runs a veteran support group. Maybe you could No, John cut me off. I'm not ready for that. Okay, I said, holding up my hands. But when you are ready, the offer's there. He nodded, then stood up. I should try to get some sleep. As he turned to go, I called out, John? He paused, looking back at me. I'm glad you're here, I said. For a moment, John's tough exterior cracked, and I saw the vulnerable man underneath. Yeah, he said softly. Me too. As I watched him disappear into the darkness of the living room, I realized that saving Emily wasn't the only life-changing event that had happened that day in the park. Somehow, without realizing it, we had saved John too. And I knew, with a certainty that surprised me, that our lives would never be the same again. The weeks following Emily's return home were a strange dance of gratitude and unease. John became a fixture in our lives, helping with chores and entertaining Emily with stories that made her eyes go wide with wonder. But there was an undercurrent of tension, like a live wire running beneath the surface of our daily routines. One evening, as I was washing dishes, Lisa cornered me in the kitchen. "Tom, we need to talk about John," she whispered, glancing towards the living room where John was helping Emily with her homework. I set down the plate I was drying. "What about him? How long is he going to stay? Don't get me wrong, I'm grateful for what he did, but..." She trailed off, biting her lip. "But what?" I pressed. "But we don't really know him," she finished. "And some of the things he says when he thinks we're not listening. Tom, I think he needs help." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "I know. I've been trying to get him to go to that support group, but he won't budge." Our conversation was interrupted by a crash from the living room, followed by Emily's startled cry. We rushed in to find John on the floor, eyes wild, breathing heavily. Emily stood frozen, her math book lying where it had fallen. "John?" I approached cautiously. "What happened?" He blinked, seeming to come back to himself. I'm sorry. The book fell and I thought." "It's okay," I said, helping him up. "Emily, why don't you go upstairs for a bit?" Once Emily was out of earshot, John slumped onto the couch, head in his hands. "I can't do this," he muttered. "I'm not cut out for normal life anymore." I sat beside him, close but not touching. "John, you saved my daughter's life. You're capable of more than you think." He looked at me, his eyes haunted. "You don't understand. That day in the park, I wasn't just saying goodbye. I was looking for a way out." The weight of his words hung in the air between us. "What do you mean?" Lisa asked, her voice barely above a whisper. John's laugh was bitter. "I mean, I was looking for a busy street, a high ledge, anything to make it stop." I felt my chest tighten. "Make what stop?" "The noise in my head. The memories. The guilt." He paused, taking a shaky breath. But then I saw that car heading for Emily, and suddenly I had a purpose again. Lisa moved to sit on his other side. "John, you need help. Professional help." He shook his head. "I've tried that. It doesn't work." "Then try again," I insisted. "For Emily. For us." John looked between us, his expression a mix of fear and hope. "You really want me to stick around?" "Of course we do," Lisa said, surprising me with her firmness. "You're family now." Something in John's expression shifted, like a door creaking open after years of being locked. "Okay," he said softly. "Okay, I'll try." As I watched John nod off on the couch that night, I realized we'd crossed the threshold. We weren't just helping John anymore, he was helping us too, showing us the true meaning of resilience and hope. And I knew, with a certainty that both thrilled and terrified me, that our journey together was far from over. The day of John's first therapy session arrived with a tension that hung in the air like static electricity. I found him in the kitchen at dawn, nursing a cup of black coffee, his knuckles white around the mug. "You ready?" I asked, pouring myself a cup. John's laugh was humorless. "Ready to spill my guts to a stranger?" "Not really." "Want me to come with you?" He shook his head. "This is something I gotta do alone." I nodded, respecting his decision. "I'll be here when you get back." As the door closed behind John, I couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. Hours crawled by. Lisa took Emily to physical therapy for her arm, leaving me alone with my thoughts. I paced the house, straightening picture frames and reorganizing bookshelves. The slam of a car door jolted me from my nervous cleaning. I rushed to the window, expecting to see John. Instead, I saw two men in military uniforms approaching our front door. My heart leapt into my throat. I opened the door before they could knock. Can I help you? I asked, my voice steadier than I felt. The taller of the two spoke. We're looking for John Reeves. We were told we might find him here. I hesitated, unsure of what to say. May I ask what this is about? The men exchanged glances. Sir, it's a matter of national security. We need to speak with Mr. Reeves immediately. Before I could respond, I heard John's voice behind me. It's okay, Tom. I'll handle this. I turned to see John standing in the hallway, his face a mask of resignation. Captain Reeves, the shorter officer said, we need you to come with us. John nodded, then looked at me. I'm sorry, Tom. There's a lot I haven't told you. John, what's going on? I asked, my mind reeling. He sighed. Remember when I said I did things over there? Well, some of those things, they're classified. And now they're coming back to haunt me. You can't just leave, I protested. What about therapy? What about Emily? John's eyes softened. Tell Emily, tell her I'm sorry. And that her superhero had to go away for a while. As John walked out with the officers, I felt like I was watching a part of our family being torn away. Lisa's car pulled into the driveway just as the military vehicle was leaving. She rushed out, Emily in tow. Tom? What's happening? Where's John going? I shook my head, still in shock. I don't know. But I'm going to find out. Emily tugged at my sleeve. Daddy, is John in trouble? I knelt down to her level, forcing a smile. No, sweetie. John he just has to go away for a little while. As I held my family close, watching the dust settle on the road where John had disappeared, I made a silent vow. I would find out what was going on, and I would bring John back. Because that's what family does. And like it or not, John was family now. The days following John's abrupt departure blurred into a haze of unanswered questions and sleepless nights. I called every government office I could think of, but hit nothing but dead ends and stone-faced bureaucrats. I'm sorry, sir, but we have no information on a John Reeves, became the mantra I heard on repeat. One night, as I sat at the kitchen table surrounded by scribbled notes and cold coffee, Lisa placed a hand on my shoulder. Tom, you need to rest, she said softly. I shook my head. I can't. Not until I find out what happened to John. And what if you can't? Her voice was gentle, but her words cut deep. Before I could answer, a sharp knock at the door made us both jump. I approached cautiously, peering through the peephole. My heart skipped a beat. It was one of the officers who had taken John. I opened the door. Where's John? I demanded, foregoing any pleasantries. The officer's face remained impassive. Mr. Parker, I need you to come with me. Not until you tell me what's going on, I insisted. He leaned in close, his voice barely above a whisper. Sir, this isn't a request. It's about John. And your family's safety. A chill ran down my spine. I looked back at Lisa, who nodded, fear etched across her face. I'll be back soon, I promised, hoping I wasn't lying. The ride was silent, the city lights blurring past as we drove to an unmarked building on the outskirts of town. Inside, I was led to a sparse room with a single table and 2 chairs. A man in a crisp suit was waiting. Mr. Parker, I'm Agent Thompson. Please, sit. I remained standing. Where's John? Thompson sighed. Mr. Reeves is complicated. What do you know about his military service? Not much, I admitted. He didn't like to talk about it. John Reeves was part of a highly classified operation, Thompson explained. An operation that went south. Lives were lost, Mr. Parker. Important lives. My mind reeled. But what does that have to do with now? Someone's targeting the survivors of that operation. We brought John in for his protection. Protection? I scoffed. It looked more like an arrest. Thompson's eyes narrowed. Mr. Parker, by taking John into your home, you've inadvertently placed your family in danger. The weight of his words hit me like a punch to the gut. What are you saying? I'm saying that the people after John won't hesitate to use you, your wife, or your daughter to get to him. I slumped into the chair, the room spinning. What do we do? Thompson leaned forward. We need your help, Mr. Parker. John trusts you. And right now, trust is in short supply. You want me to what? Spy on him? We want you to keep him safe. And in doing so, keep your family safe. As I sat there, the gravity of the situation settling over me like a heavy blanket, I realized that the simple act of buying a coffee for a stranger had set in motion events I could never have imagined. Okay, I said finally. What do you need me to do? Thompson smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. Welcome to the shadow world, Mr. Parker. There's no going back now. The world I knew crumbled like a house of cards. 1 minute I was Tom Parker, ad exec and family man. The next, I was deep in a web of government secrets and hidden dangers. Agent Thompson's words echoed in my head as I drove home. Keep John safe. Keep your family safe. I found John waiting in our living room, looking like he'd aged a decade in days. They told you, he said. It wasn't a question. I nodded. Some. Not enough. John sank into the couch. I never wanted to drag you into this, Tom. Too late for that, I said, sitting across from him. I need the truth, John. All of it. He took a deep breath. It was supposed to be a simple extraction. Get in, grab the target, get out. But someone sold us out. We walked into an ambush. Who was the target? A scientist. He developed a bioweapon that could target specific genetic markers. In the wrong hands. I felt the blood drain from my face. Did you get him out? John's eyes met mine, haunted. We did. But the cost. God, the cost was too high. And now someone's after the survivors? He nodded. They want the formula. They think one of us has it. Do you? No. But they don't believe that. A chill ran down my spine. And my family? Leverage, John said, his voice barely a whisper. I'm so sorry, Tom. Before I could respond, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number, check your email. Now. With shaking hands, I opened my laptop. There, in my inbox, was a video. I clicked play. Lisa and Emily appeared on the screen, bound and gagged in a dark room. A distorted voice spoke, bring us Reeves and the formula, or your family dies. The world tilted on its axis. I looked at John, fury and fear warring inside me. I'll turn myself in, he said, already standing. No, I growled, surprising myself with the steel in my voice. We're going to fix this. Together. John's eyes widened. Tom, you don't understand what you're getting into. I understand that these bastards have my family, I snapped. And I understand that you're the key to getting them back. For a moment, I saw a flicker of the soldier John must have been. He nodded, resolve hardening his features. Okay, he said. But from here on out, you follow my lead. This isn't a game, Tom. One wrong move and we all die. As we geared up, gathering weapons and tech I never knew existed, I realized I'd crossed the line. There was no going back to my old life. But with Lisa and Emily's lives on the line, there was no other choice. I was in the shadow world now, for better or worse. And God help anyone who stood in my way. The warehouse loomed before us, a hulking shadow against the night sky. John's intel had led us here, to the outskirts of the city where my family was being held. Remember the plan, John whispered, his eyes scanning the perimeter. I go in first. You're my backup. I nodded, adrenaline coursing through my veins. Just get me to Lisa and Emily. We moved silently, years of John's training evident in every step. I followed, feeling clumsy in comparison but driven by a desperation that sharpened my senses. The first guard went down without a sound, John's hands a blur of efficient movement. We pressed on, deeper into the labyrinth of steel and concrete. A muffled cry echoed from somewhere ahead. My heart leapt. "Lisa," I breathed. John held up a hand, stopping me. "Wait," he mouthed. Footsteps approached. A man in a crisp suit rounded the corner, flanked by 2 armed guards. I recognized him instantly. Agent Thompson. "Well done, Mr. Parker," Thompson said, his voice dripping with false praise. "You've brought us exactly what we wanted." John tensed beside me. "You son of a bitch. You set this up." Thompson smiled, cold and reptilian. "The bioweapon was never the target, John. You were. Your enhanced genetics, courtesy of that little operation gone wrong. You're the weapon we've been after all along." My mind reeled. "What about my family?" "Collateral damage," Thompson shrugged. "Nothing personal." What happened next was a blur of motion and sound. John lunged at Thompson as I dove for cover. Gunshots echoed off the metal walls. I scrambled towards the sound of Lisa's voice, praying I wasn't too late. I found them in a small office, bound but alive. "Daddy!" Emily cried as I worked to untie them. "We need to move, now," I said, helping Lisa to her feet. We ran, the sounds of fighting growing distant behind us. As we burst out into the cool night air, a final gunshot rang out. Silence fell. I turned, dreading what I'd see. John emerged from the warehouse, blood seeping from a wound in his side, but very much alive. "It's over," he said, his voice heavy with exhaustion. "Thompson's dead." As sirens wailed in the distance, I held my family close, the reality of what we'd been through finally sinking in. Weeks passed. John recovered, both physically and mentally. The truth about the operation came out, clearing his name. He found purpose in helping other veterans, turning our guest room into a permanent home. Emily's nightmares faded, replaced by stories of her superhero Uncle John. Lisa and I grew closer, our bond strengthened by the ordeal we'd survived. As for me, I learned that heroism isn't about grand gestures or secret missions. It's about the small acts of kindness that can change a life. Like buying a coffee for a stranger. One morning, I found John at the kitchen table, nursing a cup of coffee. "You okay?" I asked. He smiled, a real smile that reached his eyes. "Yeah, Tom. Thanks to you, I think I finally am." As we sat there, sharing a quiet moment before the day began, I realized that family isn't always about blood. Sometimes, it's about the connections we make, the lives we touch, and the love we choose to give. And in the end, that's the greatest adventure of all. So, what did you think of this exciting journey? Did the story of Tom, John, and their family take you by surprise? If this narrative touched your heart, don't keep it to yourself. Share your emotions and thoughts in the comments below. I'd love to know which part impacted you the most, or if you've ever had an experience that changed your life in an unexpected way. Don't forget to give it a like if you enjoyed the story. It really helps us reach more people with our stories. And hey, if you want more exciting stories like this, follow our channel. We have lots more to share with you. Turn on your notifications so you don't miss out on anything new. Remember, sometimes a simple act of kindness can trigger a series of life-changing events. Who knows what adventures await you out there? Until the next story, and don't forget, real life often surpasses fiction.